Good evening. This is St. Matthew Ecumenical Catholic Church weekly Bible study every Monday night for those who are in our time zone and recorded for those who are not. And this is our third session of a series that provides just a brief overview of what we call the wisdom books. And last week, we looked at Psalms, which most people don't particularly think of as a wisdom theme. And admittedly, Psalms has a lot of themes and a lot of utility. We use it in our liturgy quite a bit. Both Jewish and Christian traditions use it in their liturgy. Today we're going to move on to three other books that I have grouped together for reasons that I hope will become clear. They are Proverbs, Baruch, and Tobit. Now, if you grew up Protestant, Baruch and Tobit were not in your Bible. They are in the Catholic Bible, and they are not accepted as full level of importance in the Jewish tradition. They do study these books. We have studied some of these books at the Jewish seminary, Getty and I. And there are various reasons why some of these secondary books, as we will call them, were not included. But I just want to give you a chance to become familiar with what they are. Now, Robert Alter, whom I've spoken about to you before, an international Hebrew scholar, he says that Proverbs, Job, and Kohelet, which is better known by Christians as Ecclesiastes, are the most firmly fitting in the wisdom canon. But there are other books that have components of wisdom also. And he says about Proverbs, the one we're going to spend most of our time on tonight, that it's drastically different from all of the other books in the Hebrew Bible. And we know that wisdom tradition and writing was widespread in the Middle East, Near East, including Egypt. And its perspective is international, some would say even universalist in scope. It raises ideas about what is right conduct, what is the meaning of life, what are our choices, what makes for morality, where do our values come from. And you will see in Proverbs, I think there's more of a confidence, more of an assurance of what is good. And if you follow the good, you will have a happy life. That is one side of wisdom. As we progress over the weeks, you will see some other aspects of wisdom in the Hebrew Bible and in the Apocrypha, as they are called. Now, Proverbs, when written in Hebrew, as it was, uses a cadence, a rhythm that helped the hearer in Hebrew remember the words, the saying. And that made it easier in its own language for many of these to remember. Of course, we're not reading it in Hebrew. We're reading it in the English. And I wanted to read one of these sections of Proverbs with you And in the handout, you will see I have placed two translations side by side, one being that of Robert Alter, and the other one being a very well established and accepted New Revised Standard Version. And you will see that the differences are subtle. Robert Alter is trying to maintain some effect of rhythm and the nuances of meaning and the style in which they were found in Hebrew in his English version. But it's often helpful to see what the differences are in the words. There are some nuances of meaning that you will catch from this if you pay attention to both versions. And the selection I chose is important because it is a common theme through many of the wisdom books, and it is one in which we have developed ideas in Christianity which came right out of Judaism, and sometimes we don't appreciate where some of our doctrine came from. But I think by the end of this course, you will see that there's an incredible carryover between the Hebrew Bible and particularly the wisdom books. And in our doctrine that we developed actually over several hundred years in Christianity, it didn't just spring forth out of some guy's head one day. No, it has a long history of development and rabbis talking about it, and then the early Christians talking about it until it gets distilled down to some essence that's very important in our faith tradition. So one of these components that appears through some of these books is the identity of the woman wisdom. Wisdom is not an abstract concept in a sense. Wisdom is given the shape of a female, a woman, and her activity with God and her activity with men becomes very important in understanding where the wisdom books are taking us. And so some have thought that she reflected an attribute of the world, something like the meaning that God planted in creation. And she is enigmatic. She is, there are many things that you could read into her. And she is said to belong at God's side, but also to be present in the world. And she is seen as kind of a link between heaven and earth, and in some sense a mediator between divine revelation and our blessing here on earth. So wisdom, the Hebrew word is chokmah, and it is a feminine noun. And some scholars suggest that the world being created by God had a driving force, a principle of femininity that enacts or articulates what God is making. And so it's an important but kind of elusive and not totally defined idea that comes down through both Jewish and Christian traditions, and in our case, it reemerges as the Holy Spirit, and we will get to that before the end of this course. So let's look at the figure, the woman wisdom, who is talking in this passage in Proverbs 8:22 to 36 and 9:1 through 6. You have it in your handout where I had two columns where you could see how the words differ. But I'm going to read Robert Alter's translation because you're probably less familiar with it, and it may give you some slightly different perspectives of what is being said. So we shall begin. The Lord created me at the outset of his way, the very first of his works of old. In remote eons, ages ago, I was shaped at the start of the first things of earth. When there were no deeps, I was spawned, I was brought forth. When there were no well springs, water sources, nothing abounding from water, in other words. Before mountains were anchored, before hills, I was spawned. He had not yet made earth an open land, and the world's first clods of soil. When he founded the heavens, I was there. When he traced a circle on the face of the deep, when he propped up the skies above, when he powered the springs of, when he set to the sea its limit, that the waters not flout his command. The imagery here, I think, is very beautiful, and we get a sense of something happening where slowly something is coming into shape, and it is the earth coming into shape. And she says she was there when he founded the heavens, and when he propped up or made firm the skies, when he established the fountains of the deep. So going on here, when he strengthened the earth's foundations, and here I think that the two translations give a different aspect to what's going on. Alter says, and I was by him and into him. I was his delight day after day, playing before him at all times, playing in the world, his earth, and my delight with humankind. I'll read it in New Revised. Then I was beside him like a master worker, and I was daily his delight, rejoicing before him always, rejoicing in the inhabited world, and delighting in the human race. I like the playfulness that Alter conveys. There's an intimate relationship between wisdom and the Creator. and that they are playing together, playing in the world, and they are delighted in humankind. And now, sons, or my children, listen to me. Happy are those who keep my ways. Listen to reproof and get wisdom, and do not cast it aside. In other words, listen to me. Reproof. If I scold you, it's in love. I want you to pay attention. Happy the man who listens to me, to wait at my doors day after day, to watch the posts of my portal. For who finds me has found life, and will be favored by the Lord. And he who offends me lays waste his life. All who hate me love death. New Revised says, those who miss me injure themselves. And Alter says, and who offends me lays waste his life. There's a little slight difference there in understanding, but it's a powerful one. Wisdom has built her house. She has hewn her pillars, 7. And we know that in ancient Hebrew times, numbers were important. And 7 is an important principle that you see coming through the scriptures. We have 7 days in the week. There are 7 pillars here. And then I found this extremely interesting. She has slaughtered her meat, has mixed her wine, and laid out her table. And you see in the other verse, she has set her table also. So table, as we know, as from our 23rd Psalm study, he set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Here we have a table again, and we have a table being filled with sumptuous things to eat, as we did in the 23rd Psalm. So this is important. It's an important image. It's important to know that here is the Lord taking care of us at a basic level. So then she has set out her young women, calls loud from the city's heights. Whoever the duke, let him turn aside here. Let him turn aside here. In the other version, it reads, you that are simple, turn in here. There's more of an idea that we can be fooled, we can be mistaken, we can be disillusioned, we can be the dupe. And we have all felt like the dupe from time to time. And she is calling those who are dupes to come in and come to her table. The senseless, she said to him, come, partake of my bread and drink the wine I have mixed. Forsake foolishness and live, and strive on the way of discernment. Now look at the other version. Lay aside immaturity, or forsake foolishness, and live, and walk in the way of insight, being aware of what we're doing, thinking ahead, using good judgment, discernment means that we're thinking about things very carefully and looking at what we should pay the most attention to. So I think that is very, very powerful in seeing what she does. I have misplaced paper here. Excuse me for a second. Got all shuffled around when I was preparing. Okay. Anyway, I think you get a taste of Proverbs and the image of wisdom and Hakma, a feminine driving force that was present at creation. And that becomes very important. We will see her again in some other places as we study the wisdom books. Now, in Proverbs, most of you have probably thought of it as a series of sayings, and it is. And if you look at the material on Proverbs following in the handout, we have a section in Proverbs verses 9, 7, 12. They follow right after this section where wisdom is talking about herself. And it's more the typical, what we think of as Proverbs. You know, it's like a study in contrast. If you do this, then that. Do that, then this. And two possibilities are posed with one another that might seem to be in complete contradiction. But as we all know, in the real world, seldom is anything that clean. And that's part of what Proverbs does. It sets up these countering influences that we have to think about, to discern, to weigh, to think about before we make decisions. So let's just read a couple of those and you'll get the sense of Proverbs. He who corrects an arrogant man earns insult, and he who reproves a wicked man incurs opprobrium, which basically means severe criticism. So if you correct somebody who's arrogant, you're going to get insulted. And if you reprove a wicked man, you will be severely criticized. So it doesn't look like much of a choice, huh? There's going to be that kind of outcome if you should confront arrogance or wickedness and open your mouth to say anything about it. He says here, reprove not an arrogant man, lest he hate you. Reprove a wise man, and he will love you. In other words, the arrogant person is not going to accept the criticism. The wise person will appreciate having their flaws pointed out, their mistakes pointed out, and will love you for opening their eyes to a better way. Instruct a wise man, and he becomes still wiser. Teach a just man, and he advances in understanding. So that gives you just a quick sample of Proverbs, but most important, the figure wisdom. Now I'm going to say just a little bit about the other two books, and there's a material there, short material, that you can read. Baruch was the secretary of the prophet Jeremiah, and the scholars think there were several compositions that were originally separate that were put together. It's a very short book. It's only 6 chapters long. But for our purposes, I've selected the most important part having to do with praise of wisdom in the law of Moses. Here is where we see that the law, following the law, is seen as wise. God did not create these laws, these commandments, to make our lives miserable. Rather, we probably will be miserable if we don't follow them. And it's kind of like one of those natural consequences, as we talk about in psychology. So here are a couple of verses from Baruch. Learn where prudence is, where strength, where understanding, that you know also where are lengths of days and light, where light of the eyes and peace. So if you look at and understand wisdom, you will have a better appreciation of your life and its length or its shortness and the light that you've been given. And then I will skip over to Baruch 3:29-38. Who has gone up to the heavens and taken her, or brought her down from the clouds? Who has crossed the sea and found her, bearing her away rather than choice gold? None knows the way to her, nor has any understanding of her paths. Yet he who knows all things knows her. He has probed her by his knowledge and filled it with 4-footed beasts. I'm not quite sure what that means, but I think that the wisdom of animals, their innate understanding of how to live, is kind of implied that it's in our 4-footed critters, which I would be inclined to agree. I learn a lot from our fine fur friends. And there's more there you can read about contrasting light, the stars, and when he calls them, they answer. Here we are, shining with joy for their maker. So in a sense, the stars become personified too. So then we'll look very quickly at Tobit. Tobit, there are actually several books in the Hebrew Bible that are considered like religious novels. Jonah and Judith, and Tobit is another one. And in the book of Tobit, Tobit begs God to just let him die after a series of misfortunes. And he has a son named Tobiah. And there's a young woman who also prayed for death. She had lost 7 husbands. And God's... Oh, can you turn off my phone? Okay, sorry. I thought I had it turned off. God sends the archangel Raphael in disguise to aid them both. And some people think there's some details in this book that might be historical, but it's also got some elements that are like a novel as well. And the angel Raphael brings healing and wisdom. Raphael called the two men, Tobit and Tobiah, aside privately and said, "Thank God, give him the praise and the glory. Before all the living, acknowledge the many good things he has done for you by blessing and extolling his name in song. Do not be slack in praising him." And so one response to misfortune here is to be aware of all that is good that we've been given. And he goes on to read, "Do good and evil will not find its way to you. Prayer and fasting are good, but better than either is almsgiving accompanied by righteousness. A little with righteousness is better than abundance with wickedness. It is better to give alms than to store up gold. For almsgiving saves one from death and expiates every sin." So Tobit has a story where an angel is sent to help bring healing. So there is a healing component in wisdom, in this case delivered by the angel Raphael. And it is not a long book either. It's 14 chapters, and it is a real story. You can sit down and read this some evening and get the full picture of Tobit. So Tobit, you can see, has the same kind of sayings as we see in Proverbs. Do good and evil will not find its way to you. Prayer and fasting are good, but better than either is almsgiving and righteousness. So even though it's a story, it uses that same kind of comparison. So these are three. Proverbs is one you will hear much more often than the other two. But I really felt I'd been cheated when I found out about Baruch and Tobit, and there's also a book named Wisdom that we had not had in my Bible in growing up. I've given you several short selections of verses from these three books, along with prayers for you for this week. And if you will follow that and take time to read a little more in each of these books. This is just a sample, and that's about all we can do in the time that we have. But we will look for those common themes as we gallop across these different books. Each one could be a study in its own right, but I thought it would be good to at least give you a sampling, taste, if you will. Sit down at the table of wisdom and enjoy her feast. That would be my prayer for you for this week. And we'll close with the prayer that we used last week also, that, as I told you, Yeti and I had discovered in Jewish prayers, if I can find it through all my pages here. This is a Jewish traditional prayer for nighttime. In the name of Adonai, the God of Israel, may the angel Michael be at our right. May the angel Gabriel be at our left. And in front of us, the angel Uriel. And behind us, the angel Raphael. And above our heads, the Shekinah, divine presence. Amen. And I encourage you, if you have the means, please go to the St. Matthew Ecumenical Catholic Church website and press our donate button. We really need your help. This is a tough time for churches all around, as our whole system of trying to reach and take care of people has had to change. And we love to come to you in these studies and in our masses and our children's classes and to be with you. And we love hearing from you. If you have any questions, send me a note or put it on the Facebook group, and we'll pick up on it and answer them. Please donate, though, if at all possible. We need your help. So with that, we'll say good night. I ran a little bit over today, but it's kind of tough to do this stuff in a half hour. As you can see, you could easily spend an hour on the book. So that's it for this time. Goodbye. I love you. Thank you for being present, and bless you in all that you do this week. And do remember to sit down at the table of wisdom and share a meal with her this week. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.